figured I'd mess around with some ChatGPT, checking out this AI stuff. I was messing with this the other day. That's why there's all this over here. And then I was like, man, I should have done all this on stream. What the hell is wrong with me? Let's see, let's pull this out. Throw it up over here. There. Let's just go up here to the beginning. And if someone's listening, let me know if that music's too loud, okay? So, I'm just going to delete this right there just because I have no clue what the hell I'm even going to do there. But I want to try to use ChatGPT to go ahead and create just a basic, personal monthly budget thing. Nothing as fancy as like Mint or what is it called, Acorn or anything. Nothing fancy, just something simple. Instead of me just going to my Excel spreadsheet or Google Sheets, whatever you use, and keeping track of everything that way. So I figure with ChatGPT, I've never messed around with user logins, so we'll check it out. So I guess what we'll have to figure out what we need to do is get everything started. Okay, so when I was playing around on here the other day, I asked ChatGPT, and if anybody doesn't know what it is, it's an AI or artificial intelligence, and you basically just talk to it, ask it questions. So you would ask it questions, and if you don't get the answer you're seeking, rephrase the question. Like I even had ChatGPT help me redo my entire resume the other day, just because I was like copying one segment at a time, and I was like, hey, this is for this type of resume. Rewrite this in a sense that it's in a more professional manner, and man, that was that was something else. I'll show my brother it, like my resume from last year compared to the one ChatGPT helped me make, and it was quite impressive. Oh my god, I can't stop yawning. So I asked ChatGPT if I wanted to create a web application in Java utilizing the latest versions of Java, Spring Boot, Gradle, and Timeleaf, what other dependencies would I possibly need if my application consists of a user login and a persistent database that needs to be backed up regularly? So ChatGPT says, in order to create a web application in Java utilizing the latest versions of Java, Spring Boot, Gradle, and Timeleaf, you would also need to include the following dependencies: Spring Security for user authentication and authorization, a database management system such as MySQL, Postgres, or MongoDB, and a corresponding Java database connector such as MySQL connector/J or MongoDB Java driver. Then we would need Spring Data for interacting with the database, a Spring Task Scheduler for scheduling regular backups of the database, Spring Web for building the web application, Timeleaf Spring for integration between Timeleaf and Spring, and a build tool such as Maven or Gradle to manage dependencies and build the application. You may also want to consider adding other dependencies depending on the specific requirements of your application. Now, when I was taught Java, I was taught to use Gradle. So under my Spring Initializer here, I'm going to choose Gradle instead of Maven. I've used Maven before, and it's set up completely different. Like, for example, if we choose this Gradle column right here and go to Explore, we'll see how the dependencies are set up like this: implementation and test implementation. And then we got like Java right here and the versions and whatnot. But if we check out Maven, it's more spread out. Whereas Gradle is like more compact. But I wonder if some people prefer Maven just because if you want to, well, I mean, since it is so spread out, all you would have to do is find the group ID, the artifact ID. If it has a scope, there's a version. You can just, just change it on the fly. In a weird way, I actually prefer Gradle. Now, the difference between Groovy and Kotlin, if I remember correctly, I believe Groovy is more like it's I guess you could say it's like loosely written, whereas Kotlin's more like strict. Like Groovy, you don't need to add parentheses, whereas Kotlin, you need to like add the parentheses. It's more strict about it. So I'm gonna shoot for Java 17. I don't know why that's bold. And we are going to use Spring. That's gonna be the framework I'm gonna be using. We're gonna use Gradle, Timeleaf. See Spring Security. We're gonna go with MySQL, mainly because I've never used it before. I've always used Postgres for my last job. Let's see Spring Data, Spring Task Scheduler. I actually have all this written up already, but we're just gonna rewrite it. I think I have it written up anyways, or maybe it's down below. Let's see Spring Web. So this is what I know I need, and well, that we're gonna be using, and then these are what we know we need to look for, but there's gonna be more. So then, after this conversation, I ask, where do I find a greater dependency information for a task scheduler? And then it says, the greater dependency information for Spring Task Scheduler can be found in the Spring Framework documentation. You can add the following line to your build.greater file in order to include the Spring Task Scheduler dependency. Now, what I also found neat is that it went ahead and gave us the Gradle information that we would need, except, well, minus the latest version. So for the latest version, all we'd have to do is just find the latest version and then just remove that section and just put in the latest version. Make sure to replace latest version with the latest version of the Spring Framework available. You can check the latest version of this on the Spring Framework official website or by searching on a Gradle repository manager such as mvnrepository.com. Alternatively, you can also use the Spring Initializer start.spring.io, which is a web application that can generate a Spring Boot project with the desired dependencies. And that's when we get into okay. So that's when we get into the Spring Initializer. So we can choose Gradle, choose Java, and here's the versions of Spring Boot that we can choose: 2.7.8 and 3.0.2. And then we have these two snapshots. The snapshots, I guess you could say they're ready, but it's not like the official thing. I think that's how it works. My memory is kind of fuzzy when it comes to that type of stuff. But yeah, we're gonna stick with 3.0.2. Then here's where we would add the dependencies. So we got Java, we got our version of Spring, which is gonna be 3.0.2. Then we got Gradle Kotlin. Let's go ahead and find Timeleaf because we know that's what we're going to be using. So there we have Timeleaf. But for this task scheduler, so if we type in task, it pops up, allows the user to develop and run short-lived microservices using Spring Cloud. That's not what we're looking for. If we try to type in scheduler, nothing pops up. If we try to type in Spring task, it just brings that task back again. So when I was looking this up, I noticed it wasn't there. So I said, you mentioned Spring Initializer. What would the Spring Initialize? Okay, what? Oh my God, I can't talk for shit. You mentioned Spring Initializer. What would the Spring Task Scheduler be called there? Damn, my English is horrible. Then ChatGPT says in Spring Initializer, the Spring Test Scheduler is not a standalone dependency. Instead, it is part of the Spring Boot Web dependency, which is a meta dependency that brings in a set of useful dependencies for building web applications. You can include the Spring Boot Web in your project by selecting it from the dependencies section of the Spring Initializer website. Alternatively, you can also include the Spring Boot Web dependency by adding the following line to your build.grade file. And then it provides the code for it. That's sweet. And then again, make sure you replace the latest version with the latest version of the Spring Boot available. This will include the Spring Task Scheduler, Spring Web, and other necessary dependencies web application, including the embedded Tomcat server, which makes it easy to run your application. You can also find more information about the Spring Boot web dependency and its transitive dependencies in the Spring Boot documentation. Okay, so here's Spring Web. Here it says build web including RESTful applications using Spring MVC uses Apache Tomcat as a default embedded container. But we also now know it has the task scheduler in it as well. So we're going to click on that as well. So we're going to delete this. And I'm going to type that up here. And then delete it right here. Okay, now we got this nice conversation going. So I asked it. So from what we have discussed so far, if I add from the Spring Initializer these dependencies: Spring Boot Dev Tools, Spring Web, Spring Session, REST, repositories, How, Explorer, Spring Web Services, Timeleaf, Spring Security, Spring Data GPA, JDBC API, Spring Data JDBC, MySQL driver, and Spring Data R2DBC, then I should have all the required dependencies to get started, correct? And then it replied with, the dependencies you have listed will give you a good starting point for building a web application with Spring Boot, Spring Web, Spring Security, Spring Data JPA, and Timeleaf. Now we know we need to go in here and add some more stuff because I forgot I added all those previously because I kind of already knew what to look for. So we got Spring DevTools. This provides fast application restarts, library load, and configurations for enhanced development experience. And then I'll read over everything it said too. After I add these all in real quick. I'm just gonna type these in. Let's see here. And yeah, I think I did eventually take out a couple of these at least, just after talking with the AI and figuring out more in depth about what each of them meant. Let's see. Spring Web Services. Let's see, Spring Security. Spring Data GPA. Shit. See, here's this. What? Oh, I didn't copy it. Ha 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 ha. Okay, so now we have all these added. And then in response to what I had asked the AI, ChatGPT then replies with, the dependencies you have listed would have would give you a good starting point for building a web application with Spring Boot, Spring Web, Spring Security, Spring Data JPA, and Timeleaf. I already said that, didn't I? So to break it down, Spring Boot DevTools, that's this one right here. See, on Spring Initialize says provides fast application restarts, live reload, and configurations for enhanced development experience. ChatGPT goes further, explains this dependency provides developer tools for hot reloading, remote debugging, and more. Next, we got Spring Web. And this says the dependency includes the base building blocks for building web applications using Spring MVC. If we go over to the Spring Initializer, it states for the Spring Web, build web including RESTful applications using Spring MVC uses Apache Tomcat as the default embedded container. Then we got Spring Session. This dependency provides session management for web applications. On Spring Initializer, it has it listed as provides an API and implementations for managing user sessions information. Then we have REST repositories How Explorer. This dependency provides a tool for exploring and interacting with Spring Data REST repositories. On Spring Initializer, browsing Spring Data REST repositories in your browser. Then we got Spring Web Services. This dependency includes support for creating SOAP web services using Spring. If you are not planning to create SOAP web services, you may not need this dependency. So I kind of like how the AI points that out. It's like, I don't know if I would be needing that or not. And it even points out there, if I am not planning on creating SOAP web services, then I may not need that dependency. But I know we're going to be using, when we get into it, we're going to be doing REST. So I guess what we could do for now is over on Spring Initializer for Spring Web Services, it states, facilitates contract first SOAP development, allows for the creation of flexible web services using one of the many ways to manipulate XML payloads. Now, whether we may or may not need that, I don't know. But for now, we're just going to leave it in there since it's just a dependency and we can just always remove it. Then we got Timeleaf. This dependency provides support for the Timeleaf template engine, which allows you to create dynamic web pages using HTML templates. Over on Spring Initializer, it has Timeleaf listed as a template engine, a modern server-side Java template engine for both web and standalone environments, allows HTML to be correctly displayed in browsers and as static prototypes. Then we got Spring Security. This dependency provides security features for web applications such as authentication and authorization. On Spring Initializer, highly customizable authentication and access control framework for Spring applications. So the guy's been pretty much like on point with describing all of these so far. Spring Data JPA. This dependency provides support for working with JPA Java Persistence API repositories, which allows you to interact with a database using Java objects. On Spring Initializer, persist data in SQL or SQL stores with Java Persistence API using Spring Data and Hibernate. Then we have JDBC API. This dependency provides a standalone Java API for interacting with databases using SQL and JDBC. Oh wait, I just read the wrong damn line, didn't I? And I even have it highlighted. Fuck me. Okay, so to reread this correctly, hopefully I can stay on the highlighted line. This dependency provides a standard Java API for interacting with databases using SQL. God, the hell am I doing? On Spring Initializer, database connectivity API that defines how a client may connect and query a database. Then we got Spring Data JPC. This dependency provides support for working with JDBC repositories, which allows you to interact with the database using SQL and JDBC. On Spring Initializer, it states, persist data in SQL stores with plain JDBC using Spring Data. Two more. Then we have MySQL driver. This dependency provides a MySQL JDBC driver, which allows you to connect a MySQL database using JDBC. And then on Spring Initializer, it just states MySQL JDBC driver. That's it. So I like how ChatGPT is describing some things a lot better. Okay. Then we got Spring Data. Come on, Tara. Spring Data R2DBC. This dependency provides support for working with R2DBC reactive relational database connectivity repositories, which allows you to interact with a database using a reactive programming model. Are you good, girl? On the Spring Initializer, it says provides reactive relational database connectivity to persist data in SQL stores using Spring Data and reactive applications. Then it says, however, you should consider other aspects of applications such as database management, backup, and recovery. Additionally, why do you stink, Tara? Additionally, you may need other dependencies or libraries depending on the specific requirements of your application. It's also worth noting that Spring Data GPA, Spring Data JPC, JDBC, and Spring Data R2DBC are mutually exclusive. You should only use one of them depending on the kind of persistence access you need for your application. Then I went on to say, I removed Spring Data R2DBC from the list of dependencies between then. So like I said, I removed Spring Data R2DBC from the list of dependencies. That would be right here. Gone. Between Spring Data JPA and Spring Data JDBC, which one would be more beneficial to use for both a web application and an Android mobile application? Then it goes on to give me a nice lengthy description. Both Spring Data JPA and Spring Data JDBC provide support for working with databases, but they have some key differences that may make one more beneficial for your use case than the other. What? They may have some key differences that may make one. I don't know why that just confuses me for. Spring Data JPA is built on top of the Java Persistence API, JPA, which is a Java standard for accessing relational databases. JPA provides a consistent, high-level API for interacting with databases using Java objects, and Spring Data JPA builds on that by providing a convenient, high-level API for working with JPA repositories. JPA is widely used and well established, and it can be used with a wide range of relational databases. Spring Data JDBC, on the other hand, is built on top of the JDBC API, which is a standard Java API for interacting with databases using SQL. Spring Data JDBC provides a convenient high-level API for working with JDBC repositories, which is similar to the Spring Data JPA API. Spring Data JDBC is designed to be simpler and more lightweight than Spring Data JPA, and it is optimized for working with databases that support SQL and JDBC. For a web application, Spring Data JPA would be a better option since it is more widely used and well established. It can work with a wide range of relational databases and it's well suited for complex queries. For an Android mobile application, Spring Data JPC would be a better option since it's more lightweight. It's more optimized for working with databases that support SQL and JDBC, and it's well suited for simple queries. In general, if your application requires complex queries, you may want to use Spring Data JPA as it allows you to use the full power of the JPA query language. If your application requires simple queries and you don't need the full power of JPA, you may want to use Spring Data JDBC. It's also worth noting that you can use both Spring Data JPA and Spring Data in the same application if that fits your needs. And then I ended up stating I decided to stick with Spring Data JPA. So we may come back to this later and re-add it. So then it gives me another lengthy response. I need to take a drink of water first. Good God. Okay, I decided to stick with Spring Data JPA. That is a good choice if your application requires complex queries and you want to use the full power of JPA query language. Spring Data JPA is built on top of the Java Persistence API, which is a Java standard for accessing relational databases. JPA provides, if you notice some of the things it does repeat. So it is kind of like, and reading all this. But, hell. JPA provides a consistent high-level API for interacting with databases using Java objects, and Spring Data JPA builds on that by providing a convenient high-level API for working with JPA repositories. JPA is widely used and well established, and it can be used with a wide range of relational databases. You can add the Spring Data JPA to your build.grade by adding the following dependency, and it provides the dependency for us to add to our build.grade file, which is, again, pretty cool. And then also it tells us to make sure to replace the latest version with the latest version available. Then it says, additionally, you'll need to add the dependency for the specific database you'll be using. You can add the MySQL driver by adding the following. And see, even since it knows we're going to be dealing with databases and whatnot, it says that it even provides us the MySQL one. Like, how cool is that? And then the usual spiel on replacing the latest version. You may also want to configure your application's connection. To the database in the application.properties file. Please let me know if you need help with the configuration or other related topics. See, it even asks you, the user, if you would need help setting it up. Okay. So, okay, yeah, go. God, she's stinky for some reason. Holy shit. So then I was like, okay, earlier considering other aspects of my application, such as management, backup, and recovery were mentioned, please go more in depth on the dependencies needed so I will have the capability to do so. And of course, there's one lengthy ass response. So ChatGPT says managing, backing up, and recovering a database are important aspects of any application, and there are a few different dependencies that you can include in your application to help with these tasks. Database management. Spring Data JPA provides support for interacting with a database using JPA, but it does not provide any tools for managing the database itself. You can use a tool like Flyway or Liquidbase to manage your database schema. Both of these tools allow you to version your database schema and apply changes to it in a controlled and repeatable way. And this is interesting because I've never built out a program when I was being taught Java or anything. We were taught how to use a populator in the back end, and then that's how we access our database, and then we used H2 to access the actual database. And since as long as the database, as long as the program was running, the database was live, and it was persisted and saved in memory, so to speak. And then that's when we could mess around with the SQL, uh, like selecting everything and whatnot. And then once the program stopped, all that information just went away except for the information that was specifically hard coded into the populator on the back end. So I so all this is, if we go over to the Spring Initializer and we look up, was it fly? We have flyway migration. Then if we also look up liquid something, we also have liquid based migration. They are both in here. They're both right here. And then back to ChatGPT. It provides the implementation for flyway. And it also provides for liquid based depending on which one you would like to use. Then it goes on to database backup. To create a backup of your database, you can use a tool like MySQL dump or PG dump. These tools are command line utilities that come with the MySQL or Postgres database management systems, respectively. To automate the backup process, you can use the Spring Task Scheduler to schedule regular backups of the database. Spring provides an easy way to schedule tasks using the @scheduled annotation. That would be something we will look into once we get in there, and once I ever get to that, ever get that far into the program that I want to do, because I would like to make it to where, um, I guess you could say it like auto updates, like every, I don't know, 4, 6, 8 hours, and just like auto backups the database and whatnot. Because I wouldn't mind trying to get this, if I can get it out to where I want it. I'm just talking about something simple. I will try to get it to where I can host it out and push it out live, and then try to get some like testing going on, just so I can learn from it. And then of course it provides the implementation for the Gradle, well, for our build that Gradle file. But we'll have that anyways from once we go to create everything, so we won't need to worry about that. Oh my god, why am I yawning? Whew. Good God. I think when I talk too much, I start yawning. Okay. Database recovery. To recover your database, you can use the backup files created earlier and restore them using the same tool that was used to create the backup. You can also use a tool like MySQL Enterprise Backup or PG Restore to recover your database. And I've never done anything like that before either, so we'll have to play around with that stuff once and if we ever get that far into the application. It says, please note these are just examples. There are many other tools and libraries available for managing, backing up, and recovering databases, and the best choice will depend on the specific requirements of your application. You should also consider the best practices, performance, and securities of the chosen tools. And then I had asked that, wait, there are two options for database management between Flyway and Liquidbase. Which would be more beneficial towards a web application and an Android mobile application? Because, like I said earlier, this is the first time I've ever like done anything like this, so I don't know nothing about these. And of course, it gives me another lengthy response. However, it does a pretty good job at explaining the two. Both Flyway and Liquidbase are popular open source libraries for managing database schema. They have similar functionality, but they have some key differences that may make one more beneficial for your use case than the other. Why does words like that just confuse me? So then it talks about Flyway. Flyway is a database migration tool that focuses on simplicity and ease of use. It supports a wide range of databases including MySQL, Postgres, Oracle, and SQL Server. Flyway uses SQL scripts to define and apply database migrations, and it has a simple and easy-to-use command line interface. It also provides a provide it also provides a Java API for programmatic usage. Flyway is lightweight and it's easy to integrate with other tools and frameworks. Liquidbase. Liquidbase is a database migration tool that focuses on flexibility and extensibility. It supports a wide range of databases, including MySQL, Postgres, Oracle, and SQL. So, Liquidbase uses XML, JSON, or YAML. I don't know what everybody else calls it. Maybe it's YAML, WAML. To define database migrations, it also provides a Java API for programmatic usage. It has a more complex command line interface, and it's more difficult to integrate with other tools and frameworks. I'm pretty sure that when I was going through this the other day, just like this line alone made me instantly when I like instantly choose Flyway like immediately. And then back over on Spring Initializer, Flyway migration, version control for your database so you can migrate from any version, including an empty database, to the latest version of the schema. Oh, that's pretty cool. And then liquid-based database migration is and source control library. But ChatGPT just explained them both so much better, especially given like a little pros and cons list. See, for a web application, Flyway might be a good option since it's more widely used, simple and easy to use command line interface, and lightweight. It's also well suited for simple database management tasks. For an Android mobile application, Flyway is also a good choice since it's lightweight and easy to integrate with other tools. Oh wait, never mind. It was these two parts right here of this that made me choose Flyway, because if I'm able to complete this web application, I'm gonna try and convert it over to Android as well, just so I can use it on this phone and stuff. In general, if your application requires simple database management tasks and you don't need the full power of Liquidbase, you may want to use Flyway. If your application requires advanced database management tasks and you need the full power of Liquidbase, you may want to use Liquidbase. It's also worth noting that you can use both Flyway and Liquidbase in the same application if that fits your needs. Oh, that's cool. But I won't have any use for Liquidbase because I know nothing about them. And since I'll be starting it out on it, that'll definitely be probably the best option. So then I told it, okay, I chose to opt for Flyway migration. GPT says choosing Flyway as your database migration tool is a good decision. Flyway is a popular open source library that focuses on simplicity and ease of use. It supports a wide range of databases including MySQL, Postgres, Oracle, and SQL Server. It uses SQL scripts to define and apply database migrations, and it has a simple and easy to use command line interface. Additionally, it also provides a Java API for programmatic usage, and it's lightweight, making it easy to integrate with other tools and frameworks. To include Flyway in your project, add the following dependency to your build.grader file, and it gives us, see, if we didn't have this site right here and we already had the file built out, it provides us the code. Make sure to replace latest version, which is this portion right here, with the latest version of the Flyway available. You will also need to configure Flyway to connect to your database. You can do that by adding the following properties to your application.properties file, and it provides us the code, which is fantastic. You can use, and it also provides a default username and password, so whatever you want your username and password to be, you can replace them. Same thing with the host, the port, and the database. That's fantastic. Whenever I get to that point, I'm going to have ChatGPT help me out with that too. Let's see. You can also use the Flyway command line tool to execute database migrations. Please let me know if you have any further questions on how to use Flyway or any other related topic. Then, after that, I was like, earlier you stated that the Spring Task Scheduler was a part of the Spring Boot web dependency. Why would I need to add in this new implementation if I added the Spring Boot web dependency. It says, I apologize for any confusion. You are correct that Spring Task Scheduler is included in the Spring Boot web dependency. The Spring Task Scheduler is a part of the Spring framework that provides support for scheduling tasks, including the ability to schedule the execution of methods annotated with this @scheduled annotation. When you include the Spring Boot web dependency in your project, you also get the Spring Task Scheduler and other necessary dependencies to build a web application, including the embedded Tomcat server, which makes it easy to run your application. You don't need to add the Spring Task Scheduler dependencies separately. You can use the @scheduled annotation to schedule tasks, and it should work out of the box. I like how it puts, and it should work out of the box. And then it provides a sample. @scheduled, cron job, public void, schedule task with cron expression, your task here. You can also schedule a task using fixed rate, fixed delay, or using a trigger. You can find more information about scheduling tasks in the Spring Framework documentation. I apologize for any confusion. Please let me know if you have any questions. And I said thank you for your clarification. And it stated, you're welcome. I'm glad I could help clarify things for you. If you have any other questions or need further assistance, please don't hesitate to ask. Building a web application can be a complex process, but with the right tools and dependencies, it can be made much simpler. I wish you the best of luck with your project. Man, this AI talks nicer to me than my own wife talks nicer to me. Some shit. My English is slipping, I swear to God. So then I said got back to database backup. I meant to say going back to database backup. How exactly is this implemented? I have never attempted this before, so it is new to me. Please provide at least one example. So ChatGPT says to create a backup of your database, you can use a tool like MySQL dump for MySQL or PG dump for Postgres, which are command line utilities that come with the MySQL or Postgres database management systems, respectively. These utilities allow you to create a backup of your database in the form of a SQL script file, which you can use to restore the database at a later time. For example, if you are using MySQL, you can use the MySQL dump command to create a backup of your database, and then it provides the code for it. That is so cool. You can run this command in command prompt or terminal. It will prompt you for the password, and then it will create a backup file named backup_file.sql in the current directory. This command will create a backup of the entire database, including all the tables, data, and indexes. If you only want to backup specific tables, you can specify them after the database name. For example, MySQL -u username -p password database table 1 table 2 backup_file.sql. I love just how it provides all this code and stuff, because when I get to this shit, that's yeah. The above command will create a backup of only table 1 and table 2. For Postgres, you can use pgdump command to create a backup of your database. Hey, also, thank you for the follow. I appreciate it. And we'll create a backup file named backup_file.tar in the current directory. You can also use the Spring task. Then I said I chose to go with MySQL since it seems to be the standard with Java and Spring. How can this be efficiently implemented into my program? Because I've never done anything like this before in any of my programs. I've always just used a populator for my Java projects, so everything's just been persistent. So all the information that I've added was always lost every time I closed the program out. So I've never actually dealt with actual databases with actual creating and backing up files and stuff. So I'm just trying to So one thing I'm trying to do was start me some research, and then I have me like a little Trello board right here, and then I'll like when I start getting into the database, I'll go back there and just start adding all those to. Okay, hold on. Come here. My God. So yeah. So I chose to go with MySQL. Then it says, if you have chosen to use MySQL as your database management system, you can use the MySQL dump command to create a backup of your database and schedule it to run regularly using the Spring Task Scheduler. You can use the runtime.getRuntime.exec however you want to put it, exec command method to run the MySQL dump command as a separate process from your Java program. For example, you can create a method that creates a backup of your database and schedule it to run at a specific time using the @scheduled indentation. And then it provides a sample. We add the service, we add the schedule. I'm just like ecstatic on how it just provides all this information. Because it would have taken me forever to figure this portion out. Like, it seriously would have. So I can just come back here and be like, hey, here's where we're at in the project. Can you help me set this database? And it's going to help me set up all this shit. No more Google and Stack Overflow for me. Well, not entirely. I bet when I start getting into errors and shit, I'll most likely have to. So then I asked, would any modification to this example need to be made to fit my program specifically, or would this be ideal? So the response is, the example I provided should work as is. As is. Can you believe that shit? So it's like, just copy it, just bam, paste that some bitch in there, and run it, figure out what works, what doesn't work. Oh my God. So then it tells us what we can do. Replace username, password, database, and backup file.sql in the MySQL dump command with the appropriate values for your program. Change the path where the backup file is going to be saved in the command. You can use /path to backup folder, or use the relative path to the current directory. You may also want to add some error handling to handle cases where the backup process fails. See, it even thinks of that stuff. Like, I wasn't even thinking about that. Then it goes on to state, you may also want to customize the cron expression in the scheduled annotation to schedule the backup at a specific time that fits your needs. You can also move the backup file to another location after the backup process is completed. For example, you can use the file API in Java to move the backup file to a different folder, or you can use a cloud storage service like AWS S3 to store the backup file. I might have to check that out too when I go to check it out. I might try and figure out where I can save it locally and save it up on the cloud. Come here, Tara. Jesus. Yeah. Yep. Let's see here. Then it says, please keep in mind that this is just an example, and you should consider the best practices, performance, and security of the chosen approach. You should also test the backup process regularly to ensure that it's working correctly and that you can restore the database from the backup if necessary. ChatGPT is down now too for you? Yeah, I should be good as long as I don't hit refresh. As long as I don't hit refresh, I should be good, because all this has already been, like, this is a conversation I had with it the other night. Okay. Sorry, my cat, she's very clingy. So that's a very interesting. We'll revisit this topic in a bit. And then ChatGPT states, I'm glad I can provide you with some useful information. Creating and maintaining database backups is important as effective implementation. And it's good to have a solid strategy in place. It's always a good idea to test the backup process regularly to ensure that it's working correctly and that you can restore the database from the backup file if necessary. If you have any more questions or need further assistance, please don't hesitate to ask. Character AI is up. Oh, that's pretty cool. It is a. Tara, what are you doing? Okay, so then I said, now back to database recovery. Since MySQL was chosen, can examples and instructions be given? So ChatGPT says, sure. To recover your MySQL database, you can use the backup files created earlier and restore them using the MySQL command line utility. You can use the MySQL command line. Oh my God. Why do they say command line? You can use the MySQL command to restore your database from a backup file by running the following command, and it provides the command. This command will restore the backup file to the database. You can also use the MySQL command to restore a specific table from a backup file while running. Whew, by running the following command, and it provides us the command for backing up a specific table. I'm going to make a note. Let's see here. So I've been trying to make this habit of where every time I try to think of something, I always forget. So that's the reason why I have my notes up right here as well. So that way I can just go there, create notes real quick, and it's just there. Because I am so forgetful. Let's see, where was I? Okay. So it provides us the code for being able to restore a specific table. That's sweet. So then it goes on to say, this command will restore the backup file, table backup file.sql to the table of the database. It's important to note that this command will restore the data to the database. It will erase all existing data. So it's recommended to use it on a new or a test database. You know what? Let me highlight this. Let's see, research how to create. Just because I know I'm gonna have to ask myself that later, I might as well just put it up there now. So you can use oh my God. You can also use some MySQL backup tools like MySQL Workbench or Extra Backup that provide a graphical user interface for creating and restoring backups, and it's more user friendly. Also, you should consider the best practices, performance, and security of the chosen approach. And you should also test the recovery process regularly to ensure that it's working correctly and that you can restore the database from the backup file if necessary. Please let me know if you have any other questions or if there's anything else I can help with. So then I went on to ask it, When might a recovery like this need to run? Certain scenario or on a regular basis? Update gone wrong? ChatGPT says there are a few scenarios where you might need to run a database recovery. Data loss. If you experience data loss due to a hardware failure, software bug, or other unexpected event, you can use a backup file to restore the lost data and get your application back up and running. Upgrades and migration. Before you upgrade your database management system or migrate your data to a new server, you should create a backup of your database to ensure that you can restore your data if something goes wrong during the upgrade or migration process. Auditing and compliance. Wow. Auditing and compliance. I can't believe I just said those two words together. Some industries are required to keep backups of their data for auditing and compliance purposes. It's important to have a regular backup schedule in place to meet these requirements. Testing, oh my god. Then we got testing and development. Backups can also be used to create a test environment that mirrors the production environment. This can be useful for testing new features, changes, or debugging issues. It's generally a good idea to have a regular backup schedule in place, such as daily, weekly, or monthly backups, depending on your specific needs and their criticality. I think that's the correct way to say that. Criticality of your data. Dating. Jesus Christ, man. I feel like trying to teach my wife English. I've lost how to do my own English. This way, you can ensure that you always have a recent backup available in case of an unexpected event. It's also important to keep in mind that the recovery process can take some time depending on the size of the database, so it's a good idea and factor it into your disaster recovery plan. Which led me to go, so is a backup file different than a database file being run in day-to-day activities? I thought if my program's database was persistent and a backup file was generated or rewritten per se every 6 hours as an example, then it would be just this file. But you make the backup file seem like it's only for recovery purposes. Can you elaborate on this further? A backup file is a copy of your database that is created at a specific point in time. It can be used to restore the database to that point in time in case something goes wrong. A backup file is usually created using a tool like MySQL dump or pgdump, which creates a SQL script file that can be used to restore the database. A database file, on the other hand, is the file or files that contain the actual data or database. A database file can be created, modified, and accessed on a regular basis as your application performs its day-to-day activities, such as inserting, updating, and deleting data. A backup file is different than the database file being run in day-to-day activities because it's a separate copy of the database that's created at a specific point in time. It can be used to restore the database to that point in time in case something goes wrong, such as data loss, hardware failure, or software bugs. At this point, I'll make a comment. So this was like my thought process with these databases, because like I said earlier, when creating my projects, I've never done anything with actual database files. They've always just been persisted with a populator in the back end. So my mindset was I would create my populator to start, and then as I'm entering in data into the persistent database, that as it's running and the program actually goes and creates a backup file, that would be the actual, like, that would be it. So once the program shuts, like once I turn it off and then go reboot it back up, it would use that database file and then continue on being persisted until and then like keep updating it as it goes. Like that's how my mind was seeing it, but apparently it's completely different things. Okay. You are correct that keeping a backup file that is generated or rewritten every 6 hours, for example, would be useful for recovery purposes. as it ensures that you always have a recent backup available in case something goes wrong. However, it's also important to know that depending on the size of the database, the backup process can take some time and resources. So it's idea to plan for this and factor into your disaster recovery plan. In summary, a backup file is a separate copy of the database that's created at a specific point in time. You store the database to that point in time in case something goes wrong, while the database file is the file that contains the actual data of your database and is used on a regular basis as your application performs its day-to-day activities. So then I stated, thanks for the detailed explanation. In this case, tell me more about the actual database file that is used to be accessed, inserted, updated, and deleting data. So ChatGPT goes, sure. The actual database file, also known as the data file, is the file or files that contain the actual data of your database. I'll note here that in my extreme ignorance, when I was thinking of a data file, I thought it was gonna be like how like an Excel spreadsheet or a Google Sheets file is with because I've seen I've made CSV files before at my past job, so I was just thinking it would be like a book of different tables, and then like everything would just be like linked together for some damn reason. Like that's how I was visualizing it. It should be just one file. It'd be like a Excel book with all the different tables of spreadsheets. I don't know why I was visualizing it like that for, but that's just the way it is, I guess. My dumbass. The data file is created and managed by the database management system DBMS that you are using, such as MySQL, Postgres, Oracle, etc. The data file is usually stored on a hard drive or SSD on the server where the DBMS is running, and it can be in various formats depending on the DBMS you are using. For example, in the case of MySQL, the data file is stored in the var lib MySQL directory by default, and the data is stored in the form of NODB table spaces, which are similar to tables in a relational database, but they are stored in separate files. Each table space corresponds to a specific table in the database, and it's made up of a set of data files and index files. In other DBMS like Postgres, the data file is stored in the PG data directory by default, and the data is stored in the form of tables, indexes, and other objects. The data file can be accessed, inserted, updated, and deleting data using SQL commands or ORM, Object Relational Mapping. Libraries, for example, if you are using Spring Data JPA, you can use the provided repositories to access, insert, update, and delete data from your database without the need to write SQL statements. It's important to note that a data file can grow over time as you insert more data into the database, as it's recommended to have a regular maintenance schedule in place to optimize the performance of your database and to free up space. Please let me know if you have any other questions or if there's anything else I can help you with. And I just thought of something. So, in regards to optimize the performance and freeing up space, we're going to add research how to optimize and free up space as needed. Please let me know if you have any other questions or if there's anything else I can help you with. As you can tell, I had a lot of conversations with this AI about databases just because I know nothing about databases. So the database file is not a singular file, but possibly multiple files. ChatGPT. Yes, that's correct. The database file, also known as the data file, can be made up of multiple files depending on the database management system DBMS that you are using. For example, in the case of MySQL, the data file is stored in the varlib MySQL directory by default, and the data is stored in the form of NODB table spaces. Yes, I know, it sounds like I'm repeating. ChatGPT does this. Which are similar to tables in a relational database, but they are stored in separate files. Each table space corresponds to a specific table in the database, and it's made up of a set of data files and index files. Oh my god, excuse me. This allows the DBMS to manage the data more efficiently and can improve the performance of the database, as it can read and write the data in parallel from multiple files. It also makes it easier to backup and restore the data, as you can backup or restore specific tables or indexes. It's important to note that the format and structure of the data files can vary depending on the DBMS you are using, and it's also important to have a good understanding of how your DMS stores and manages the data files in order to optimize the performance and maintain the data properly. So the way this is talking, I wonder if that's when like multi-threading can come in handy. So then I asked, utilizing the dependencies listed earlier, how would I go about creating both my first data file or files and my first backup recovery file? I was told, when you first set up your web application, you will need to create the data files for your database and create a backup file, also known as a recovery file, that can be used to restore the database in case something goes wrong. Here's an overview of how you create your first data files and backup file. I love the way this site just explains stuff. If only Google and Stack Overflow is this straightforward. Instead of people going Google, Google, Google. So first, you will need to install and set up a MySQL server on your computer or on a remote server. You can download the MySQL server from the official website. I actually went and did that, I think, just so I could play around, fuck around with it. 2. Next, you will need to create a new database and tables for your application using the MySQL command line client or using a tool like MySQL Workbench. You can use the following command to create a new database. I think when I go to start my program, I won't even touch like the database stuff to probably like later on. I'll probably go and create like my users, and then start creating other class files so I can start mapping it all to the user. And then once I get that persistent database going, then I'll probably try to map in MySQL and Flyway and all that good stuff, and start learning how to utilize those. But at least it provides the command for creating a new database. 3. Once you have created a new database, you can create tables for your application by running SQL scripts or using a tool like MySQL Workbench. 4. Now that you have your data file set up, you can create a backup file of your database by running the following command, and it just, bam, there. This command will create a backup file named backup. Okay. So the next question was, how do I know what files to create if the persistent database has yet to be created on the back end? So before you create the data files for your database in a backup file, you need to design the database schema. The database schema is the blueprint of your database. It defines the structure of the database, including the tables, columns, data types, constraints, and relationships between tables. If you haven't created a database schema yet, you can use a tool like MySQL Workbench to design your database schema. MySQL Workbench provides a graphical user interface that allows you to create and modify database schemas, including tables, columns, data types, constraints, and relationships. You can also use code-based tools such as JPA or Hibernate, which allows you to define the database schema using Java classes and annotations. That's what I'm planning on doing. Once you have designed your database schema, you can use it to create the data files for your database and a backup file. The database schema will tell you what tables and columns you need to create and what data types they should have, so you know what files you need to create. You can also use those tools to automatically create the tables, and the schema on your database. Spring Data JP, for example, can be used to create the database schema and tables according to the entity's definition in your code using the spring.jpa.hibernate.ddl auto property. It's also, yeah, that's going to be confusing as hell. It's also, why do I keep saying it's also? It's important to note that once you have created the data files in the backup file, you should keep a copy of the database schema and the SQL scripts used to create the database in case you need to recreate the database in the future. I'm just going to copy and paste this directly. Oh shit. Bam. So then I said, I feel like I know enough to go ahead and use Spring Initializer to generate my project. So ChatGPT says, great. Spring Initializer is a great tool for quickly generating the basic structure of a Spring-based application. It allows you to select the dependencies that you need, and it will generate a project with the necessary files and configurations to get you started. You can use Spring Initializer to generate a new project. Steps. Oh my god, I'm yawning. Go to Spring Initializer website. We got it on right on the right side. Select the dependencies that you need, such as all these dependencies right here. Choose the type of project you want to generate, such as Maven or Gradle. We're going to go Gradle Kotlin. Enter the group and artifact names for your project. That would be the group name and artifact name right here. Click on Generate button to download the project. That would be this button right here. You can also use the generated project as a starting point and customize it to fit your specific requirements. I hope this helps, and please let me know if you have any other questions or if there's anything else I can help you with. Okay. There's actually something else I want to check out real quick. Okay. So then, once we have all this situated, we would actually... Oh yeah, so on a note, I'm not going to go with Java 8 because after Java 8, some of these features have actually been improved. I think it's either somewhere between 9 and 13. I know they redid the switch statements and made them, I think, to be more efficient. So it seems like from what I've researched so far, Java 17 might be the best way to go. You can do Java 19, but it looks like there's only a few improvements, but not enough to, like, say going from like 8 to 11 or 8 to 17. So going from like 17 to 19, like, isn't that big of a jump to say it's worth it, I guess. So sticking with 17 is good for now. So once I go to Explorer, this is the build.gradle, and this is all those dependencies that it has. Again, this is in Gradle. For Maven, if I was doing Maven, it would look like this. So everything's broken out. I just personally prefer Gradle. And then once I click generate, it will, well, I'll just click on it. See, right here, it just gives me a zip file. And then, whew, we would just go from there. Okay, so from here, I was downloading MySQL because I've never done that before yet, so I had questions for it. So I asked, which version of MySQL to be installed, zip archive or zip archive debug binaries and test suite should I choose? So ChatGPT told me the version of MySQL that you choose to install will depend on your specific needs and use case. The zip archive version of MySQL is a standalone version that can be installed and run on a single machine. This version is suitable for development and testing purposes as well as for small to medium-sized production environments. The zip archive debug binaries and test suite version of MySQL is a version that includes additional debugging tools and test suites. Sorry, I got distracted. I had a pop up my other screen. I'm updating IntelliJ at the same time. So all my like IDEs are like, hey, give us permissions. Fuck, where was I? So we'll just start right here. Is a version that includes additional debugging tools and test suites. This version is intended for developers and advanced users who need to debug and test the MySQL server. It is also intended to be used as a base for building custom MySQL distributions. I don't think I'm going to be doing anything like that with this app at all whatsoever. So I'm pretty sure I just went with the zip archive. Oh yeah, I did. So then it says, if you're planning to use MySQL for development testing purposes, or if you're planning to use it in a small to medium-sized production environment, more JetBrains permissions. Okay. If you're planning to use MySQL for development or testing purposes, or if you're planning to use it in a small to medium-sized production environment, the zip archive version is probably the best option for you. This version is easy to install and use, and it includes all the features you need to get started. If you're planning to use MySQL in a large-scale production environment, or if you need to debug and test the MySQL server, then the zip archive debug binaries and test suite version may be a better option for you. It's also important to note that before installing any version of MySQL, it's always a good idea to check the system requirements and compatibility with your current environment. If you're not sure which version to choose, you can always start with the zip archive version and then upgrade. To note that before installing any, oh yeah, I've already read that part, didn't I? If you're not sure which version to choose, you can always start with the zip archive version and then upgrade to the zip archive debug binaries and test suite version later if needed. So yeah, I ended up going with the MySQL zip archive just because I'm basically GPT says, okay, so I asked it after downloading the MySQL zip archive, how do I install it? Because when I extracted the files, there was like no executable file or anything of that sort. So it says, so step one is downloading the MySQL zip archive file from the official website. Did that. Extract the contents of the archive to a directory on your computer on Windows. Did that. On Windows, navigate to the extracted folder and run the MySQL install db.exec file to initialize the MySQL data directory. On Linux, navigate, yeah, it's all Linux stuff. Did that. On Windows, run the MySQL d.exe. Did that. And I was like absolutely going no command stuff for Linux as well. But I don't use Linux. Then it says for step 5, run the MySQL secure installation. See, I never actually got that far when I was trying to go. It just wouldn't do it. Because it says to do this, and then it says once the server is running, you can use the MySQL command line client to connect to the server and create a new database and tables for your application. And then it says to configure MySQL, you can use the my.cnf file. It is located in the etc. on Linux and MySQL installation directory on Windows. It's also important to note that the installation process and the steps required may vary depending on your specific operating system and environment. You can refer to MySQL documentation for more detailed instructions. Also, it's worth mentioning that it's important to have a good understanding of how to configure, maintain, and secure MySQL. I know nothing about that. If this is your first time using MySQL, it's highly recommended to familiarize yourself with it. I'll be doing that at a later point in time. So this is where I came running into a problem. I said, I am on Windows. I extracted the file, but there is no .exe file to run. So ChatGPT says, I apologize for the confusion. My previous answer was based on the assumption that you are using a version of MySQL that includes an installer. It seems like the version of MySQL that you downloaded is a Windows zip archive version, which doesn't include an installer. Instead, it's plain zip archive that contains the MySQL server, client, and connector files. So, like, when I first read that a couple nights ago, I was like, well, why the hell did you give me the link to go and download it? Like, why would you do that? But hey, this is what it's all about, and how the AI learns and grows, right? So then it goes on to say, here's an overview of the steps you need to follow to install the MySQL zip archive on a Windows operating system. It says download the MySQL zip archive from the official website. Done it. Extract the contents. Did it. Create a new directory to install. Did it. Move the extracted files and folder to a new directory created in step 3. Did it. Open the command prompt and navigate to the bin directory. Inside the directory where you installed the MySQL, for example, see MySQL bin. Did it. Here, this is what it's talking about, MySQL. And then this is the file I downloaded. And here's the bin. I'll make this window a lot smaller. So yeah, I created it. It's right here. Move the extracted files. That's this folder right here. And then I went to the bin. That's exactly all they did. And then run the following command to initialize the MySQL data directory. I'm going to do this on this screen just because I don't know if anything's going to pop up. That shouldn't. No, I just got that. And if I hit open in terminal, I'm pretty sure it opens up in that one terminal. Yeah, Windows PowerShell. So yeah, that's what that's talking about. And it says create a new text file named my.ini in the root directory of MySQL installation, which is right here. Shit, did I do that? No, I didn't. Well, that'll explain a lot what was going on earlier. Oops. And add the following lines to it. Okay. There's a button to click it, so. So here's that file, the my.ini. Paste. Save. Okay, exit. Okay. So then we run this command to start the server. Run this command to set a password. Run this command to test the connections. And then it says once you're connected to the server, you can use the MySQL command line client to create new database and tables for your application. This is important to note that the steps above are just a general overview, and they might vary depending on your specific operating system and environment. You can refer to the MySQL documentation for more detailed instructions. I apologize for any confusion caused by my previous answer. Please let me know if you have any more questions or if there's anything else I can help you with. We are almost done. Well, at least done with this section. Whew. It says, after I run step 8, I can no longer type anything. Where am I supposed to continue on to step 9? So then it tells me, because okay, so what was going on was when I would run everything, you could see it running. And then it would just be like sitting there waiting for the next thing for you to do. It was just waiting for something. It was like, it was an active log, just waiting for something to happen so it could show you. But there was no other pop-ups, no nothing. I couldn't type, do anything. I just had to close it out. So that's why I was asking that I can no longer type anything. Where am I supposed to continue on to step 9? ChatGPT states, when you run the command mysqld console to start the MySQL server, the MySQL server process should start and run in the foreground, and the console should be attached to the server process. That never happened. This means that any output from the server process will be displayed in the console, and you won't be able to enter new commands until you stop the server process. The only thing I could think of is nothing popped up to where I could see anything, unless I had to go to my like down here on the bottom right, click on that arrow, and you get all those little like tasks that are running. Unless it's referring to that, because I don't think I ever went and checked that. It says alternatively, you can run the MySQL server as a service, which will allow you to start, stop, and check the status of the MySQL server without having to attach the console to the server process. Here's an overview of all that. So 1, open the command prompt and navigate to the bin directory inside the directory where you install the MySQL or install MySQL. For example, MySQL bin. Run the following command to install MySQL service. So you'd run this code. Then it says run the following command to start the MySQL service. Then you run this code. Run the following command to say root password for the MySQL server, which is right here. And then for your password, you just replace those words. Run the following command to test the MySQL connection. I don't know what the UMP stands for. That I wish it kind of broke that down. I should have asked that, but I didn't think about it. This says once you install the MySQL service, you can use the net start MySQL and net stop MySQL commands to start and stop the service. All right, that's I guess the first step of this entire series that I'm working on.